welcome back. Keegan Cogan again, evaluating some sources. We're going to look at, I guess, what you could say an oldie but a goodie.
Yeah,
And
that's what we do.
even though, this is used in the 7th grade curriculum, and we teach 8th, and of course, you can kind of circle back to this quite often to make a variety of points.
There's not many students who don't know what this is a engraving of.
Sure. So, we'll go through it like it's fresh, and then we'll kind of break it down, and then, we'll make the connections and get to our point today. So looking at this, you have gentlemen dressed in red.
Yep.
With rifles, long rifles. We have some kind of, maybe I have a better version of this.
There we go.
There we go. And they're actually shooting at people over here.
I love pointing out to my students, go back to the bigger
Yeah,
picture
sure,
here.
man.
So, you've got the red coats. If you don't know what the red coats are, we got the British.
Right.
They're lined up. They are firing their muskets into a crowd of people. They're appearing to be commanding officer is standing behind them, sword raised, as if giving the order to fire.
Almost like that, yeah.
The people over here, you can zoom back in.
Yeah.
People over here, we've got like a woman, hands folded, almost like she's on her way to church.
Yep.
This guy, probably out just walking his dog,
They're unarmed.
unarmed. This guy with his hands up, no. Zoom back out. It appears to be daytime. Kids like to point out there's the moon up here. It's like you see the moon during the day.
It's pretty, yeah. It's all very clear, and then right up there, since you're bringing up the moon, it says the Bloody Massacre.
The Bloody Massacre.
Okay, so, we have an idea of what's going on. So now,
Even this building's called Butcher's Hall.
okay.
Just a lot going on here.
So,
Engraved by a patriot, a member of the Sons of Liberty,
that's what I had there.
Paul Revere. It does say it somewhere in here.
Hold on, there we go.
Paul Revere. Students might remember Paul Revere. The British are coming. He wouldn't have actually have said that though,
Right.
Because the colonists considered themselves to be British. It was actually the
Red
redcoats
coats.
or the regulars are coming. And this was published in newspapers all over the 13 colonies.
So to go back now, when we're looking at this is 1770, and just in case you haven't figured it out by now, this is the Boston Massacre.
Mm-hmm.
And here we have, the redcoats now firing on these unarmed, innocent colonists, as you were putting, and they even put women in the crowd as well. I feel like I almost cut you off there.
No, so I kind of get into the why.
Yeah.
Why would
Yeah.
a patriot, a member of the Sons of Liberty, draw this picture? Well, it happened. The British soldiers on the March 30th, was it? No, March 15th? I forget the exact date, but it was March of 1770. Opened fire.
There was snow out,
Right.
Because they were throwing ice balls,
Opened
snowballs.
fired and killed colonists. And now you kind of get into these words that we like to use as historians: bias,
Yeah, there's definitely a bias here.
perspective, reliability. That Paul Revere wasn't there that night. How does he know what happened?
Right.
Well, word of mouth. Word of mouth gets out. This had happened. But we're also got to look at the context of what's going on. We're throwing all these big social studies words at us here.
So now it's like, how many people did he talk to or interview that were actually there?
Exactly.
Or if they were there, or did they hear it secondhand?
And is he going to be talking to only his friends?
Right.
Or people who were loyalists?
He
or
probably
Tories?
didn't talk to any of the redcoats.
So you get into all these different things. Well, let's look at the context. What's going on in 1770? Well, the British have been taxing the 13 colonies now for going on 7 years.
And they do not
the
like
colonists, particularly the Sons of Liberty, don't like what these taxes going on. The Sons of Liberty, particularly, were a freedom-fighting.
If you were
quasi-terrorist organization.
the British, this was a terrorist group.
They were terrorists.
This was a counterinsurgency.
From the British perspective,
Yes.
from the American perspective, they are patriots. They're fighting for their freedom.
Every terrorist is a freedom fighter
Yes.
in certain
Yes.
points. Yep.
And this is published in newspapers all around the country. And I present it to my students. If you're opening up the newspaper in New York the next day, and this is what you see.
Oh my gosh.
What's your gut reaction?
Guy, you're going to be very angry.
Yeah.
This is definitely, and again, that was the goal here. This was to get people upset, getting them to become very emotional about this. Oh my gosh, this is again, you're going to have more and more people supporting the colonist cause.
This is one of the very first pieces of political propaganda in American history.
Absolutely.
You know, propaganda is something that is used to spread information. In sometimes it's misinformation that will either help or hurt a particular cause.
Now, what's missing? Their side.
Yeah.
You know,
Because there's truth here.
Right, there is
The British
truth there.
did open fire,
Yes.
and they did kill colonists. That
Right.
did happen. But there's a lot that gets lost in translation / illustration here.
And you can almost think it, you know, you can almost think as you're analyzing this, it's like, all right, well, what's missing? Now you got to figure out who started it. Why did they, you know, there's the why did it happen? You know, why is this mob of people even there? And that's the big piece right here.
So aftermath. All right, well, people are dead. Somebody shoots somebody else, they're going to get arrested.
And the other version is that they were in fact
Yeah.
agitators.
And there's going to be a trial of these soldiers. And believe it or not, the soon-to-be second president of the United States, John Adams,
He's the one to
patriot, signer of the Declaration of Independence, is actually going to defend the British soldiers at this particular trial, because he comes to realize that there are two sides to the story. And in one of his greatest quotes in the summation of this trial, he says, no matter what our inclinations or dictates of our passion, they cannot change the state of fact and evidence. So, I believe we have a piece of trial evidence
Sure. So
from this particular
So
trial.
what side are we getting here? We're probably getting the colonist
The
side.
biased side
Paul
of the
Revere
colonist.
is certainly a colonist. We're getting the colonist
Trying
side.
to persuade more of the colonists to join the patriot cause.
Now, during this time period, you don't have photographs. You know, everybody knows right now if you had something like this, everybody would be out with their cell phones, and this would be very, very well documented. What do you have at this point? Colored pencils and paper, and this is how you can kind of draw or inform the public what happened at a particular event. Problem there, you can see here, there's a slant. So there's not going to be really a slant when it comes to court transcripts.
Right.
And this is Captain Thomas Preston, 1770. This was the trial of the Boston Massacre. Captain Thomas Preston was commander of the British squad the evening, so here, according to Paul Revere, he's this guy. I think he might have been one, or that guy.
Standing
So,
behind his men
standing
and
behind
ordering them to fire.
Almost like ordering him to fire, according to this one.
Now,
So-
let's not forget, at a trial, you know, when you're about to give testimony at a trial, what do you have to do?
First things first, you gotta raise your right hand.
You got to swear to tell the truth.
The whole truth.
You know, because you are now under oath. And if you lie while under oath, you are committing a crime called perjury, punishable by fines and imprisonment.
Right.
It's actually something that many people, including the former President Bill Clinton, did
Yes.
that got him disbarred.
Yes.
So it's a serious
It's-
deal.
It's pretty serious.
Yeah.
So here he is, Captain Thomas Preston was commander of the British squad the evening of the Boston Massacre. He, along with other members of the squad, was tried for murder in Boston court. So here we have it. Now the setting is Boston. And now, of course, this is what he actually said. About 9, some of the guard came to and informed me the town inhabitants were assembling to attack the troops. On my way to meet the troops, I saw the people in great commotion and heard them use the most cruel and horrid threats against the troops. In a few minutes after I reached the custom house where the king's money is kept. Should we stop there?
We would, because just want to point out this is
Yeah.
9 p.m. It's not 9 in the morning.
Right.
It is 9 at night. So right there, the engraving is kind of showing a picture of daytime, and it's pitch black, because 9 o'clock at night in March, it's pitch black.
But you do have the moon.
Yeah.
They did put the moon in there. Something else I'm noticing here, you know, there's a great commotion. So
Mhm.
there is certainly a crowd,
Foul language being used.
clearly angry.
Do want to also point out that around 9 p.m. is usually when the taverns in colonial Boston closed.
Sure.
So many of these rope makers and shipbuilders and sailors are spilling out of the taverns onto the streets.
A lot of emotion. And of course, you know, we know alcohol can enhance that emotion.
Mhm.
Good, so let's move on. The crowd had surrounded the soldiers posted there, and with the clubs and other weapons threatened to execute their vengeance on them. Whoa, slow down, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now these soldiers are surrounded. These
By
people have
colonists.
clubs
And other weapons.
and other weapons.
Looking
Okay.
to take their anger out on this one soldier who's standing guard outside the customs house, where the tax money is being kept.
Because here, you know, that's where yeah, exactly. You mentioned the king's money was kept. All right, so let's move on. I was soon informed by a townsman their intention was to carry off the soldier from his post and probably murder him. This I feared might be a prelude to their plundering the king's chest.
Now, carrying them off is also something the Sons of Liberty were very famous at doing. The
tarring
and feathering of
Yep.
tax collectors and soldiers. A very horrific.
Yeah.
You know, some of the political cartoons of it don't do it
They
justice.
make it sound very
How
cartoonish,
awfully
very
horrific this was. Your clothes are stripped from you. Boiling hot tar is poured on you.
dragged.
To add insult to injury, feathers are then thrown on top.
So, these soldiers are there, and because, according to this testimony, so now these soldiers, they're present because these people right here are angry, and it seems like there is a soldier that is being threatened. All right, so let's read on. The reinforcements soon rushed through the people, and by charging their bayonets in half circles, kept the crowd at a little distance. The mob still increased and were more outrageous, striking their clubs or bludgeons one against another and calling out, "Come on, you rascals, you bloody backs, you lobster scoundrels, fire if you dare." Oof, GD, I'm sure there's the O in there. "God damn you, fire and be damned. We know you dare not," and much more such language was used. At this time, I was between the soldiers and the mob, parleying with and endeavoring, all in my power, to persuade them to retire peacefully.
I was between the soldiers and the mob.
Well,
Looks
according
a
to
little-
this,
Yeah.
he was over.
Yeah. Now, in more examination, if we were to dive deeper into this, there's actually corroborating testimony from a man named Richard Palms, a colonist, a member of the Sons of Liberty, who does testify standing. He was talking to Captain Preston before the shots were fired, and they were standing in front of the men. So what winds up happening is this Boston jury acquits these soldiers of murder, saying that they acted in self-defense. You know, because this is something we have to do. You know, we have to look for corroborating evidence. You know, because there are two sides to every story. There's two sides to history. There's perspective. We're throwing all those words at you: perspective and bias and corroborating evidence.
I mean, historians have to use the corroborating evidence, and then of course here you need that, especially in a trial,
Yeah.
where people are on trial for murder, which there are serious consequences.
And what's actually interesting in what they were yelling, the mob was yelling, "Damn you, fire at us! Damn you, fire at us!"
Right.
Yeah.
When you have angry people that are playing on a lot of emotions, and you know, to try and come up with peace, and this happens with a lot of protests, with a lot of people out there. It often evolves and moves on to violence. I shouldn't say often. You know, there are protests that do wind up taking place peacefully. I mean, but what we've seen is that, you know, through the course of history, when you have an angry mob gathered, assembled, if it's very, very delicate, and one false move, and you can have some chaos, which is what happened there. Now, let's see what else he had to say. They advanced to the points of the bayonets, struck some of them, and even the muzzles of the pieces, and seemed to be endeavoring to close with the soldiers, on which some well-behaved persons asked me if the guns were charged. I replied, yes. They then asked me if I intended to order the men to fire. I answered no, by no means. Okay. While I was thus speaking, one of the soldiers, having received a severe blow with a stick, stepped a little one on one side and instantly fired, on which turning to and asking him why he fired without orders, I was struck with a club on my arm. On this, a general attack was made on the men by a great number of heavy clubs and snowballs being thrown at them, by which all our lives were in imminent danger. Some persons at the same time from behind calling out, "Damn your bloods, why don't you fire?" Instantly, 3 or 4 of the soldiers fired, one after another, and directly after 3 more in the same confusion and hurry. The mob then ran away except 3 unhappy men who instantly expired. 1 more is since dead. The whole of this melancholy affair was transacted in almost 20 minutes. So, I mean, what caused them to fire then? It seemed like this was pretty much an accident.
Well, according to Preston, there was a man standing behind him yelling fire.
Yeah.
And from his own testimony, the fire, they're yelling, "Why don't you fire? Why don't you fire?" And what actually also happens this night,
That can be very confusing
because this yell of fire was so loud, local people a street over thought the house was on fire, and the fire brigade was called. So again, more corroborating evidence that somebody was yelling fire. And since it came from behind the men, and we know Preston was standing in front of him, he could not have given the order to fire.
So, wrapping it up here, On my asking the soldiers why they fired without orders, they said they heard the word fire and supposed it came from me. This might be the case as many of the mob called out fire, fire, but I assured the men that I gave no such order, that my words were, don't fire, stop your fire. So there we have it. We got two different sides of the story. I mean, of course, one given on the testimony, when you're looking at evaluating a source, key here, especially when you're looking here, who's the person who put this together, Paul Revere.
Who was not an eyewitness to the event.
Right.
Preston was there. More testimony will come out from more men. As I said, Richard Palms will be giving testimony as to, and corroborating the story of the soldiers, that they were acting in self-defense. But you can't change the fact that hundreds, if not thousands of colonists opened up the morning newspaper.
Right.
And they saw that picture. Are they gonna sit there and read the testimony? No. This happens, and like that.
Once that genie's out of the bottle,
opinions are formed.
you can't put it back in.
Opinions are formed. And this Boston Massacre, which probably shouldn't have been named the Boston Massacre.
Right.
Is then galvanized in American history as an event and a propaganda piece that persuades thousands of people to join the Patriot cause.
Definitely gets a lot of people angry. And that's one of those things, when the media does get something wrong, they may say it a day or two later.
They may retract it.
They may retract it
somewhere in the middle of the newspaper on page 9.
Nobody reads that stuff though. I mean, because when people are caught up with these emotions, again, it's really, really tough to undo it. Anything else here we got?
Wow, this is such a great piece.
I love this piece. It can be used for so many different things, when we're talking about propaganda, again, playing in the emotions. All right, good. Thank you for watching.